This is Brian Gordon with Chapter 7 of the Spellgrazer Saga. Chapter 7, Which Way's Better? Dunmal's mind still wandered slightly as they proceeded up the stairs that sat nestled in a hallway across from the entrance to the wizard's domain. Magic had never been his area of interest, but he had to admit that it could be very handy. He had learned some interesting techniques in his training with the large blade strapped to his back, though his training had focused more on the riddle of steel as opposed to the mystic arts. Barlow and Chandra had impressed him with their abilities. As they moved up the stairs in single file, he was glad that they were there to aid him. The next level of the tower was dark, with no windows to let in any light that may have clung in the evening sky. Light radiated from Barlow's flickering halo like a candle in the darkness as they entered the large room. Tapestries hung from the wall, along with other ornate decorations which were still intact. It seemed the demons did not often come up this far into the tower, most likely deterred by the vengeful spirit that lingered behind. Once again, Chandra's nose wiggled, and candles and torches came to life. In the center of the room sat a large, round table with one overly stuffed chair and several other, less comfortable-looking seats still neatly tucked beneath. A detailed map of the surrounding area was pinned to the table. Several arrangements of small wooden dowels, grouped by color, littered the surface. Sprawled about were old reports on the various lands under the kingdom's rule, and looked much like fallen leaves from a tree, with no discernible order. The wizard was a formidable guard dog for the king's plans, whatever they may have been. As hard as he tried, Dunmal could not put aside the confusion about the mysteries of the mystic arts at his companion's disposal. While they looked about the room for any signs of significant information, he turned to Barlow for some more information on the topic that interested him. "How does it work?" he questioned after eyeing Barlow up and down for a moment. There seemed to be nothing extraordinary about the man. He was only slightly taller than Dunmal himself, his frame thin and wiry, covered by white robes and blue trim. The only unusual aspect of the man was the luminous ring that hovered effortlessly over his head. Sometimes it would be hardly more than a flicker, and sometimes it glowed brightly enough to light a small room. "Excuse me?" Barlow's voice was still weak from his previous exertion. Even through the fatigue, his words were round and drawn out, vastly different from Ronsa's quick, nearly indecipherable jumble of speech. "Your magic. How does it work?" Dunmal did not know any other way to ask. "Well, magic is a tricky business, my friend. It is not simply a question of working, but more of a craft or form of art. With many schools of power, there are nearly endless combinations of strength one can draw from, though there are often trade-offs which make it important to focus your studies. My magic is probably entirely different from that of Chandra's, Ronsa's, or even your own." Dunmal's expression revealed his confusion until Barlow began to explain further. "Ronsa's blades do not simply move by themselves. Though he is greatly skilled with them, many of the feats he has performed today would be impossible without some sort of mystic aid. Even you possess a form of magic, that which allows you to wield your great blade with such precision and power." Thinking back to his training, Dunmal remembered something one of his masters had told him about being one with the blade, how to make it an extension of his body more than just a weapon in his hand. He had spent days learning his blade, getting in tune with the steel that forged its edge, balancing his swing, and hardening his form. By the time he had finished his training, the weapon responded to more than just his touch. It worked as one with his very thoughts. Ronsa had certainly demonstrated this with his whirlwind of steel in the courtyard earlier as well. "Just as our magics vary, in some ways they are very similar. While you and Ronsa have perhaps focused on the manipulation of your weapons, Chandra and I have learned to form weapons, of sorts, out of other materials, in this case energies. One could even think of it as an invisible fabric that blankets all of reality. And those familiar with its working are the weavers, spinning the threads of magic into our own world. My personal learnings have included the ways of the light, a powerful force that flows throughout the entire cosmos, bringing life and growth into the worlds around it. The deity I worship, Heron Sol, is also known as the Harbinger of Light, and is charged with the delivery of this power to the places that it is needed most." Dunmal slumped into one of the chairs around the table as the magnitude of the powers at work behind his back sunk in. "Just as Barlow weaves the light, I have chosen the threads of the natural forces that flow through the world around us, the infinite power of the elements," Chandra chimed in as the rest of the small group took seats around the table for the discussion. "While there are similarities in our works, the means differ greatly. Barlow has dedicated his services to Heron Sol, where my learnings have tended toward coaxing the elements into performing for me." Dunmal looked intrigued, while Barlow sat quietly with a pleasant smile on his face that almost covered the exhaustion that racked his body. "Which way's better?" Ronsa asked as he checked his dagger to make sure the mortal blow to the wizard had not damaged it in any way. "It is not a matter of better or worse, as the true strength of the practice lies within the user. Some sorcerers are more skilled than others, but there is no incorrect way to practice magic. Was it not incorrect practices that brought us together by getting the wizard killed to begin with? Dunmal asked in earnest. That was foolish practice, not incorrect. He did manage to summon the vile force that he intended, but he did not account for his own limitations of strength. Oh. Chandra explained some of the different techniques she used with the varying elemental forces at her disposal. Each class of magic she knew had a different personality. Fire would dance with her, the air would crackle with her fury as bolts of lightning coursed through her body, and the ground beneath her feet would lend her its might if she called it forth. Unlike Barlow, though, none of her particular skills were of a regenerative nature. She relied on elixirs and potions to fuel her body and spirit. Many of the tonics she used were recipes that she had discovered herself in her early years in the woods. Dunmal pondered the severity of these arcane powers for a while longer, while Barlow continued to regain his strength. The elixir that Chandra had given him gave a certain brightness to his features, as if he was lit up from the inside. It boggled his mind that there was a deeper force at work than what he would ever be able to know, an unseen binding core that ran throughout the whole of Carados. As he thought about it more and more, though, some of the stranger aspects of his world started to make a bit more sense. The large, floating islands in the sky held in place by some invisible hand, the growing sense of turmoil within the lands, not to mention the wide variety of ferocious beasts and villains that had seemed to lurk in every corner and shadow. To him, it seemed that magic had a much larger role than he could possibly understand, and was not a force to be taken lightly, but he was glad to know that he could trust his two companions with the task of managing that force. Once the effects of Chandra's elixir had fully revitalized Barlow, the group finished their various tasks and gathered their things once more. Dunmal checked one last time around the room for any valuables, but the king had been right once more, and the demons had taken little interest in passing through the wizard's guard to disturb the belongings here. The true tragedy of the donkey's tale sunk in as he looked around and realized that the mess he saw was the last moments of the king's old life. He lingered for a moment as the others returned to the doorway that led them to their final battle. With a renewed vigor, he joined them in the doorway and prepared himself to face the hulking monster ahead. Thank you for joining me for Chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed.